So I'm going to be errating some Farfa lore, and yes, if Konami can errata this commander, then I'm going to errata my own YouTube lore, whatever that is. So if you've been watching for any amount of time, and various banlist videos that I've done in the past, various podcasts, etc., different discussions like that, I've made the argument that Maxx should be banned completely numerous times. And today, basically, I'm going to be arguing against that and saying that actually I think I got that wrong. And I am now on the other fence of the argument, and I firmly believe that Maxx should actually be back in the game at 3, as a definite 3 of.
It just makes going second a lot easier. The TCG definitely did it wrong. You either need 3 of this or I guess none of this, but if you don't have any of this, going second against like any combo deck can be like extraordinarily difficult. So, and at 3, it's also good because the likelihood of you having it next to your opponent is high. So your opponent Maxx sees you, like it's okay, you can give them a few cards, and then when they try and go in on you, you Maxx them back. So it makes games like super interactive and skillful that way.
That's where basically my main kind of reflection came from, was this video in this deck profile which I uploaded by Alex, which I'll leave in the description down below and leave as a thumbnail at the end. You'll be able to take a look at his deck profile in depth, but I mean that clip there basically is all he really says about Maxx, and I think that to sort of elaborate further on it, I think that this is completely right. I think that in a game where there is a lot of special summoning and there is a very heavy reliance on going first, I think that with having something like Maxx in the metagame, people are going to be very wary about it when they're first and foremost at the very beginning of the deck building process and the deck choosing process. You know, you can't simply get away with playing a crazy broken deck that can potentially just auto scoop to Maxx. It requires you to think a little bit more about which deck to choose, and then more importantly how to choose it, because you're going to have to be able to have some kind of defensive card if you're unable to play through a Maxx, right? So I think it goes without saying that, you know, it's very important that to develop your, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh sort of theory, your skills and stuff, and getting better, it's important to reflect upon different decisions and opinions that you would have from the game's, you know, mechanical standpoint, and understand that, you know, sometimes you can get things wrong, and sometimes it's good to like try and develop that thinking forward and come up with new conclusions and new ideas. Now, the previous argument is basically that I've kind of felt that with the emergence of combo decks and the development of the power creep, and going forward just by, you know, 2018 standards, the combo decks and stuff that have emerged over recent years, basically every new good quote-unquote best deck has just been, you know, very combo based, very special summon based, and the meta generally develops around the idea of, well, you know, if your deck isn't special summoning, you aren't doing anything at all. And that, for the most part, actually does kind of still stand true, but the idea that I had was that, well, if everyone's going to be playing these combo decks, then Maxx feels very oppressive in that you are essentially being punished just by playing your own, you know, archetype and your own deck, right? But I think that what we're going to be seeing for 2018 is the resurgence of more control-based decks, and decks that are, I guess, not super OTK-oriented, not oriented around making a big broken board, but actually a lot more back and forth and stuff. And I think that just because power creep has gotten to the point where decks are doing insane combos and stuff, there is actually still chance for, you know, control-based decks to actually have a very strong place in the meta. And 2018 going forward, we're going to be seeing quite a lot of Brandish, we're going to be seeing quite a lot of Altergeist, and these cards are very much focused on controlling the board and whittling down your opponent's resources and developing strong card advantage. So to say that the dominance of special summoning is just, you know, the de facto baseline for the game going forward, I think I was wrong about that, because there, as we've seen in the OCG, some of the decks topping are all very, very control based. So I think that it's going to be generally more of a control-based meta, like we kind of saw with Zoo, for example. Yeah, while Zoo did have the option and the ability to OTK, it sort of was, by and large, a sort of control deck, and it was probably one of the best decks ever seen. So to say that, you know, control decks don't really have a place in the meta in recent years or going forward with the natural rise of power creep, I think I was completely wrong on that one. But I find that generally, as a general rule of thumb, going second is going to be quite disadvantageous in Yu-Gi-Oh! Going second means that you're going to be very reliant on, you know, drawing some sort of hand trap perhaps in your opening hand, and being able to have multiple ways to bait out negates and to bait out various defensive cards that your opponent has. So there is a lot more sort of requirements for you to go second compared to going first, where going first is basically just, you know, how many combo cards can I open and how well can I play through my opponent's hand traps with all these combo cards. There is really only like one category of cards you need to be able to draw when going first, and that's extenders. and maybe a defensive card or two. And obviously, you know, with a normal summon and some kind of starter. Whereas going second, it's very much, you know, you do need the priority, or you will need something to bait out your opponent. You will need something like a hand trap to stop any sort of mega boards being made. And you will potentially need to stop them on their following turn with a defensive card. So already that's like 3 specific cards you're going to be needing when going second. And I feel like Maxx, with the return of Maxx at 3, I believe is what would really help going second a lot more. Now, I think most of the arguments that people would make, for example, like it keeps the meta in check and stuff, I think that by and large that argument can be weak, but it just depends on how you word it and what your actual reasoning is for why you want it at 3. I think that wanting at 3 because it keeps the meta in check is very vague and doesn't quite hit home as much as, for example, Alex's argument did, which is the idea of the fact that going first is generally going to be so oppressive, and the idea that you will have a developed back and forth game more often than not. And the reason that I personally want Maxx back as well is I do think that trap cards play a strong role in this game, and for the most part, trap cards have been fairly weak, obviously without the extreme outliers, like for example, evenly matched or D-barrier. For the most part, trap cards have become generally quite lackluster. Solemn Strike is obviously a very powerful trap card, but it's not really that great going second, which is really what the problem kind of arises from, is the idea that going second is way too difficult. So I just think that Maxx coming back to 3 would sort of be able to help going second, and it would promote a bit more back and forth, I believe. Now, conversely, I still think there are problems with Maxx at 3. That without a doubt, I don't think Maxx coming back to 3 automatically solves the game. In fact, there are numerous other issues that arise if Maxx were to return to 3, and I think that they're a little bit more different than Maxx being banned. So for example, one issue that I think with Maxx being at 3 was the fact that basically whoever draws it kind of wins. You know, if I draw Maxx and you don't draw Maxx, there is a very strong tipping of the scales towards my favor, especially if I'm going first and I open, you know, 4 ways to combo off, because it's one thing to make a big crazy board, but to make a big crazy board and end with a Maxx on hand is extremely oppressive. So those are scenarios that we could see. You know, if you just simply don't draw the Maxx and you won't draw your Maxx 2/3 of your games, then that is a scenario that we could be seeing happen quite often. So the idea that sometimes whoever draws more Maxxes than the other person, that can actually be a very, very serious problem. And I think it's one of the fundamental arguments against Maxx being at 3 is the idea that sometimes it can really sometimes just come down to, you know, who can have the more Maxxes in their hand than their opponent, right? But I think really the thing that most convinced me, and the reason why I'm sort of very much in favor of Maxx being at 3 now, is I feel like Maxx does promote the return of defensive cards. So as I mentioned earlier, there is this idea where if you go first and you make your big board and you get Maxx, you lose. And I sort of relegated that to being, well, that's why Maxx should be banned, because you shouldn't be punished for playing your deck, which is, you know, by 2018 standards is going to be very combo based, and it's sort of just a break or bust style of gaming that we've got now with Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think that that's actually wrong. I think that if you are playing a combo deck that is so heavily reliant on it and you get Maxx'd, then that kind of has to go back to the deck building process. You know, what exactly did you do wrong? First and foremost, why did you pick a deck that, you know, can potentially just auto scoop to a Maxx? And second of all, if you are going to have that much of an issue with Maxx and potentially have to auto scoop, then perhaps maybe you should be playing more defensive cards, because, you know, if you are unable to play through a Maxx, you know, maybe make some kind of board, set some kind of floater, and then end with your own defensive card. The biggest issue I think arises from the fact that Maxx promotes you to play defensive cards, even in your sort of heavy combo based deck, because, you know, you can't simply rely on going first and making a big board, because if you make a big board through a Maxx, it's probably going to get broken versus someone who has like 9 cards in hand going second, right? So I think your deck is going to have to be built very differently if there's Maxx in the metagame. If you are going to choose a deck that is, I suppose, oppressed by Maxx, then it's, you know, your responsibility to make sure that you have some kind of backup plan, I guess, in your deck building process, and have the ability to, I don't know, like set a D-barrier or set a strike, just in case you aren't able to play through anything. Maybe you can do a small combo, give your opponent 1 or 2 cards, but then you have the ability to end with your own defensive cards, like various trap cards. And I think that that is what promotes more of a back and forth game than simply just banning Maxx outright. So those are my thoughts and conclusions, and if you would like to take the time to maybe let me know your opinion on Maxx a little bit more in depth in the comments, I'd be happy to read it. Or if you just want to laugh at me and say, haha, lol, Farfa noob XD is stupid, then yeah, that's fine also. It's fine if you subscribe and it's fine if you don't subscribe.